Imagine bullet trains gliding between major cities at 200 miles an hour, boasting luxury amenities and built without a single dime from taxpayers. But behind the glossy marketing renders, the math tells a different story. The private corporations building these megaprojects are bleeding cash and carrying billions in debt. While their executives testify to Congress that these systems are backed by private capital, their financial survival actually depends on a steady stream of quiet government subsidies and taxpayer bailouts. We're following the public dollars flowing into America's most prominent rail projects to track where the private funding model breaks down and how the public is left holding the check for unfinished tracks. In Florida, a company called Brightline operates what it calls the first privately funded passenger rail service in a century. In 2017, company leadership explicitly told federal lawmakers that their project was not publicly funded at all. This flowchart tracks where the money is actually coming from. It shows nearly $500 million, $486 million to be exact, moving from federal grants and local municipalities directly into Brightline-related stations, bridge replacements, and crossing upgrades. Look at the node for capital costs. True high-speed rail requires building elevated tracks or deep tunnels to separate trains from local traffic. To keep these initial capital costs low, Brightline opted to use existing street-level freight corridors from the 1800s. Running fast trains through dense, street-level intersections has a severe human cost. Since 2017, these trains have killed 193 people, giving Brightline the highest fatality rate of any major passenger rail network in the country. To address this safety crisis, the company isn't spending its own revenue. Instead, they are receiving tens of millions in state and federal safety grants to install protective fencing and AI trespasser cameras. Public money is propping up the basic safety infrastructure of a private business. And despite these subsidies, the company reported an operating loss of over $500 million in 2024 alone, leading financial agencies to downgrade their bonds to junk status. On the West Coast, the California high-speed rail project sold voters a similarly appealing pitch in 2008. The state promised a fully funded $34 billion rail line connecting San Francisco to Los Angeles by 2020. This chart visualizes the current financial reality. The original $34 billion estimate is dwarfed by the modern $128 billion price tag. That leaves a $90 billion funding gap, exacerbated by billions in withdrawn federal support. State lawmakers are actively investigating how the finances spiraled so far out of control. A 2026 legislative audit request formally calls out over a decade of mismanagement and broken commitments. The scale of the errors is vast. In just one instance, the rail authority settled with a prime contractor for a $537 million cost overrun. That single contract change more than doubled the original agreement price. With the budget collapsing, planners are now rapidly degrading the system's physical design. Instead of dual tracks allowing seamless two-way travel, they plan to build a single shared track. And rather than connecting to downtown transit hubs, the Merced station will terminate in a remote pistachio orchard 4 miles outside the city limits. When mega projects secure approval using fictionalized budget estimates, the result is predictable. They devolve into massive financial pits, draining public resources while stripping away the very features that made them useful in the first place. The inability of passenger fares to cover heavy infrastructure costs is a documented economic reality. Multiple historical transit studies confirmed that user fees alone almost never generate enough revenue to pay for laying new tracks or maintaining stations. Throughout the 20th century, every major leap in American mobility required heavy government intervention. The original electric streetcar operators saw their equipment wear out faster than they could replace it, and the sprawling interstate highway system only exists because the federal government injected $25 billion of public money to build it. Past developers were often clear about the need for municipal support. Today's rail promoters take the opposite approach, typically waiting until projects are authorized and underway before the requests for public subsidies begin. Relying on a private funding narrative allows developers to bypass the initial taxpayer resistance that often blocks billion-dollar infrastructure bills. The pitch of private rail acts as a financial Trojan horse. The goal is simply to secure the necessary permits and get the first heavy machinery digging into the dirt. Once thousands of tons of concrete are poured and neighborhoods are reconfigured for the tracks, the developers have the leverage. When the initial capital predictably dries up, the project becomes too big to fail. Politicians are then cornered into a choice. They can either let a half-built concrete monolith stand as a permanent monument to failure, or they can open up the state treasury and finish the job with public funds. Heavy infrastructure requires heavy capital. The idea that corporations can deliver massive public rail networks without massive public subsidies is an accounting fantasy. If we want a modern, high-speed rail network in the United States, we have to stop waiting for private corporations to build it for free. We need to treat transit as a public utility and demand transparent, upfront accounting. Otherwise, we will keep writing blank checks for trains that lead nowhere.